Today we will explore the story of a young British man by the name of Alexander Monson. This story took place in the coastal town of Diani along the Kenyan south coast. Diani is a stunning paradise of sandy beaches that is very popular with international tourists. But as we will see, for Alexander, Diani was more than just a tourist destination. It was his second home. Unfortunately, it was also the place where he would meet his untimely fate in the year 2012 when he was just 28 years of age. So let's find out what happened there. Welcome back to the Crime Gist. My name is Damisa. Alexander Monson was born on January 4th, 1984 in London to Lord Nicholas Monson and Hilary Monson. He had a younger sister known as Isabella Monson, whom he grew up with in London, Oxfordshire. After several years, however, their parents, Nicholas and Hilary, separated. Hilary made the bold decision to move to Kenya. She had some family there. Her brother and his wife were already living in Kenya at the time, so she wouldn't be entirely alone in a new country. Her brother lived in Nairobi, but Hilary decided to settle in Diani along Kenya's Indian Ocean coast. Here, she purchased a complex of upmarket holiday cottages and began working in the hospitality industry by hiring and renting them out to tourists. Nicholas Monson, on the other hand, stayed back in London and soon afterwards remarried. He married a lady known as Karen Green, and the two went on to be blessed with a son, Rupert Monson. Alex and his sister Isabella continued living with their father and schooling in Britain, but they would visit their mom Hilary in Diani during school holidays. Alexander Monson attended Marlborough College in Wiltshire. Later, he joined City University in London to study psychology. After completing his university studies, he decided to go live with his mom, Hilary. He had fallen in love with Diani the few times he had visited. In the year 2008, he officially moved to Kenya. In Diani, he helped his mom run the holiday cottages that she owned. Alexander absolutely loved the beach lifestyle. He spent many hours out on the reef kite surfing. His days were filled with sun-soaked adventures, swimming in the ocean, exploring the nearby coral reefs, and enjoying delicious local cuisine. Compared to London, Diani was alive with the sounds of music and the scents of grilled seafood in the air. Alex spent most of his evenings socializing with friends. He was described as very friendly with the local people. By the year 2012, the then 28-year-old Alexander Monson had made many friends in Diani. Among them was a guy known as Andrew Simiyu Boy. On the night of 18th May 2012, Alexander and Boy were at a local establishment called Tandoori Bar. The atmosphere in this bar was electric and lively, with people enjoying the night, drinks flowing, and chatter and laughter echoing off the walls. Alex and Boy each ordered a beer. Alexander's drink of choice that night was a white cup beer. They then enjoyed a game of pool at the pool table. The two were in very high spirits, not knowing that the night would soon take a dramatic turn and forever change their lives. As the night progressed, the two friends thought they had had enough. They planned on going to meet up with another one of their friends, known as Erico, as soon as they left Tandoori Bar. At around 1:30 a.m., they headed out to the parking lot of the bar and got into Alexander's double cabin car. After a few minutes, a bouncer or security guard at the establishment thought that he felt the smell of marijuana coming from the direction of Alex and Boy's car. He also thought that he saw Alex smoking something. He approached the two friends, and when he questioned them as to what they were doing, things somehow escalated into a disagreement. The bouncer then spotted a police patrol car parked at a distance outside the bar. He went over to the police car and found one Corporal Naftali Chege in it. He informed the officer that there were two guys smoking an illegal substance in the parking lot. The officer followed the bouncer back into the bar's parking lot. He approached the double cabin, knocking on the car's window. Alexander was at the driver's seat and Bowie on the co-driver's side. The engine was on as they were about to reverse the car from the parking lot. As Corporal Naftali Chege would later say, Alex had a half-smoked joint in his mouth, which he quickly snatched out to use as evidence. He then ordered him to switch off the engine and come out of the vehicle. However, Alexander Monson resisted and instead took out his phone to make a call. It would later emerge that he was calling his friend Erico to inform him that he was about to be arrested. Erico is the guy they were supposed to meet after leaving the bar. Alex promised to call Erico again and update him on his situation. While he was on call with Erico, Corporal Chege was also making a call of his own, asking for reinforcement from the police. And when his colleague Inspector Mulwa arrived, Alex and Bowie voluntarily came out of the car. The two were then handcuffed together and taken into custody. They were transported to DIANI police station, and after recording their statements, they were allowed to each make a call. Bowie called his dad, and within a short time, his father came to the station and bailed him out. By now, it was around 2 a.m. on the morning of 19th May 2012. When Bowie and his dad left the station, Alexander was in perfect health and in good spirits. Alex, however, did not call his mom. He called his friend Erico to come and bail him out. It seemed like he did not want to bother or worry his mother, who at the time was not even in DIANI. She was away in Nairobi that week visiting her brother. At around 2:30 a.m., Erico came to the station to try and bail him out. He was, however, not successful. He was informed that the officer in charge, or the OCS, was not around, that he had left to attend to a robbery incident, and so bail could not be processed without his presence. From where he was standing, however, Erico managed to see Alexander in his cell. He looked healthy and well, but since he couldn't be allowed to bail him out, he left the station with the resolve to try again later. At 5 a.m., Hilary, Monson's mother, who, as we mentioned, was in Nairobi, received a phone call from Erico. She was informed that her son had been arrested and was being held at DIANI police station. Erico said that he had tried to bail him out, but the police wouldn't let him. Hilary immediately called one of her British friends in DIANI, known as Joanna Kenaway. She requested Joanna and her husband, William Kenaway, to go try secure bail for her son. Since it was still early, that is 5 a.m. in the morning, the two waited for daylight before heading down to the station. They got there at around 10 a.m. But as soon as they arrived, they were met with quite shocking news. They were informed that Alex was not in good shape. He was in fact unconscious in his cell. Joanna and her husband quickly called for an ambulance to take him to hospital. At about 10:30 a.m., Alex was placed on a stretcher and taken to hospital. Joanna and her husband followed the ambulance in their car. They then called Hilary to inform her that her son had been rushed to Palm Beach Hospital after being found unconscious. Worried sick, Hilary quickly booked a flight from Nairobi to DIANI, arriving at about 4 p.m. that evening. When she walked into Palm Beach Hospital, she found her son in a coma in an ICU machine. He had some visible bruises on him and he was handcuffed to his bed. Sadly, within an hour of her arrival, at about 5 p.m., Alexander was pronounced dead. Devastated and confused, she called her brother in Nairobi with the bad news. Her brother, that is Alexander's uncle, also booked a quick flight to Diani, arriving that night at around 10 p.m. The family was determined to get to the bottom of what had caused Alex's death. He had been in perfect health when they last saw and spoke to him. Upon inquiring, they were told that Alex had been arrested for smoking marijuana and had died of a drug overdose. But to them, that sounded highly unlikely. Alex had no history of sickness, either from drugs or otherwise. The next day, they went to Diani police station and asked to look at the OB. The OB, or the occurrence book, as they found, indicated that Alexander was booked into the cells appearing normal. So how could he have died of a drug overdose if the report says he was okay at the time of booking? There was some inconsistency somewhere. Upon speaking to Bowie and Erico, they learned that Alex had been healthy and well when Bowie left the station. Erico too confirmed that he had seen him looking okay sometime between 2:30 and 3 a.m. So something must have happened to him at the station sometime after 3 a.m. in the early hours of 19th May 2012. And so the family grew suspicious and refused to accept the official narrative of a drug overdose. They therefore arranged for a postmortem to be conducted. The postmortem was done by Dr. Mbuko, a government pathologist. Back in England, Alex's dad, Lord Nicholas Monson, and his wife, Karen Green, received the heart-wrenching news. They learned that Alex had been taken from them under mysterious and tragic circumstances. Determined to seek answers, Nicholas Monson booked the next flight to Kenya. Upon his arrival in Diani Beach, Nicholas quickly sought out information about the circumstances of his son's death. And just like everyone else, he did not buy the narrative of a drug overdose. They had a feeling that the police knew more than they were letting on. They suspected that the police had tortured Alex and were now working hard to cover it up. They just didn't have proof yet. But the government pathologist, Dr. Mbuko, was already on it, and soon they would have some answers. A few days later, on 22nd May 2012, the autopsy report was out. According to the report, Alex had died of being hit by a blunt object. That is blunt force trauma in medical terms. And just to be sure, the family ordered for a second assessment. That is an independent autopsy from a second pathologist. Dr. Ngulungu was the family pathologist who conducted this second autopsy. What he found was that Alexander's death was not due to toxicological reasons, and so the drug overdose story could not have been true. Both Dr. Ngulungu's report and that of Dr. Mbuko agreed that the cause of Alexander's death was pressure caused to the brain by a blunt object. There was further evidence that he had tried to defend himself. There were bruises to the left wrist, which were consistent with a person defending a blow to the head. His scrotum was also very severely bruised, and both pathologists agreed that it was caused by blunt force injury. These independent results completely contradicted the police claims of an overdose. It became clear to the family and friends that this was not just a personal tragedy. It was a reflection of a larger problem, that is police brutality and corruption. Armed with this new evidence, they reported the matter to the police for investigation. But they quickly realized that this would not be so easy. For 3 years, the case went nowhere. Due to the code of silence that exists in the police force, No one was willing to investigate their fellow officers or hold them accountable. In fact, Nicholas Monson faced a lot of police harassment and intimidation. He was at one point shot at several times as he drove past the same police station that his son met his death. But this did not dampen his resolve to seek justice for his son. As the months turned into years, this fight for justice only seemed to drag on. The legal system proved to be a challenge filled with delays and bureaucratic hurdles. Yet, the Monsons remained undeterred. Nicholas Monson, in particular, was relentless. He held vigils, organized rallies, and spoke at public forums, keeping the memory of their son alive while shining a spotlight on the injustices faced by many. After 3 years of no progress in the case, the family was advised to report the matter to IPOA for further investigation. IPOA is an independent body in Kenya that investigates police misconduct. In full, it's the Independent Policing Oversight Authority. In 2015, they made that report and the IPOA recommended that there be an inquest into the matter. This lasted for another 3 years. But in June 2018, the case finally reached a turning point when the inquest found that there had been attempts by police officers to cover up Monson's death. The police had initially claimed that Alex had died of a drug overdose, but evidence showed that he had died after suffering a traumatic blow to the head. And the most likely suspects of this crime were the policemen who had him under their custody that night. Following this revelation, 4 police officers were arrested and charged with Alexander Monson's murder. These were Naftali Chege, Charles Wangombe, Baraka Bulima, and John Pamba. And so, the courtroom became a battleground, a place where the truth would finally emerge. Testimonies would reveal the brutal treatment Alexander had endured while in police custody. He was certainly well up to around 3 a.m. on that fateful night. The only rational explanation was that at one point between 3 a.m. and 5 a.m., Alexander was removed from his cell by the police officers in the station. They probably spoke to him about bail and tried to extort him. This was when a disagreement occurred which led to the brutal torture of the deceased. Alexander tried to defend himself, and that explains the bruises he suffered on his left arm. It was not clear which of the officers inflicted these injuries, but it emerged that at 5 a.m., one of the officers, John Pamba, checked on Alex in the cell. He found him looking unwell in his cell, but took no action. By 8 a.m., Alexander's condition had worsened. Medical assistance was not sought all this time. He was only taken to hospital at around 10:30 a.m. when the Kenaways came to bail him out. Alexander was under the custody of these 4 accused officers from the time of his arrest until the next morning. They must have known what happened to him or who among them inflicted these injuries. In their defense, the officers would say that they knew nothing of what had happened to Alexander Monson. They had done their job, arrested him, booked him, and left him in his cell until that morning when he was found unconscious. He could have fallen and hit his head in the cell for all they knew. He looked intoxicated to them when they arrested him. However, the evidence would prove that a fall could not have caused some unexplained injuries like the ones to the groin. Also, the amount of drugs and alcohol found in his system was close to none. Again, the OB indicated that he appeared normal at the time of arrest and booking, and so their defense was inconsistent with the evidence at hand. The trial lasted for another 3 years. But on November 11, 2021, Judgment Day arrived. This was 9 years since Alexander Monson had died. Judge Eric Ogola stated that from the evidence, he had not been able to find who was responsible for the death of the deceased. The prosecution had failed to prove the charge of murder. This basically meant that the officers were not guilty of murder, but luckily, they could still be held responsible for his death through negligence, since they had failed to discharge their duty of care. This, for the reason that the injuries occurred to him while he was under their care and watch. While the prosecution had failed to prove the charge of murder, they had proved that the deceased died out of culpable negligence by the 4 officers. The deceased came into their hands a healthy man, but he left without his life. He added that those who brutally tortured Alexander were known to the 4 officers, but their identities could not be confirmed by the court because of the blue code of silence in the police force. This is a silent code in which the police protect their own. However, in this case, the accused persons had the duty of ensuring that the deceased, who was under their custody, received immediate medical attention. This duty they failed to dispense, and this failure amounted to professional negligence. It was their responsibility to take care of Alexander the moment they became aware that he was unwell. And so, the judge announced the verdict. The 4 police officers, although not found guilty of murder, were found guilty of manslaughter. Corporal Naftali Chege was sentenced to 15 years in jail, Charles Wangombe to 12 years, Baraka Bulima was given 9 years, and John Pamba was sentenced to 12 years. Outside the courtroom, Alex's mom, Hilary, told reporters that she was disappointed by the sentence given to the police officers accused of killing her son. She felt that after waiting for close to 10 years for justice, the sentences given to the accused persons were just not enough. But even if justice could never fully compensate for the loss of their son, at least they could now go on with their lives knowing that the culprits were behind bars. She said that this would also send a strong message to the Kenyan police force to have respect for human life. However, sadly, this moment of justice at last did not last so long. After serving only 18 months in jail, the 4 police officers were released. This happened after the appeal they lodged at the Court of Appeal was successful. As expected, the Monsons were devastated by all this. All their efforts had gone down the drain. This exposed once again how hard it can be and how long it can take to get justice in the Kenyan courts. The Monson family spent thousands of dollars to get their case this far, resources that many people in this country do not have. Despite their profound sadness of losing their son, they had transformed their grief into action, fighting for justice for their son. But all that still led them nowhere. When they thought that they had gotten somewhere, that they had finally found justice, they were quickly reminded that we live in a rotten and corrupt society. This case highlighted the systemic issues that continue to plague Kenya's law enforcement. What happened to Alexander Monson was not altogether a surprise to most Kenyans. Police cells have in the past become death traps for inmates, most of whom have as their only crime the fact that they were suspected by police to have committed a crime. There is a similar case I covered recently that you should definitely check out. I will link that episode up here. Human rights organizations have documented hundreds of killings over the years by police officers, the majority of which have gone uninvestigated. Kenyan police face frequent accusations of brutality and extrajudicial killings from civilians and human rights groups, but officers are rarely charged and almost never get convicted. The IPOA was established in 2011 to investigate rogue officers and has received millions of dollars in foreign funding. However, the number of convictions it has secured does not compare to the thousands of complaints against police officers since its creation. Alexander Monson's story may have ended too soon, but the impact of his life and the fight for justice that followed continues to inspire others to stand up against injustice. The Monson family's resilience turned this tragedy into a powerful force for change. They have endured quite a lot. For example, 5 years after the death of Alexander Monson in DIANI, his younger brother, Rupe Monson, unalived himself while in a state of psychosis believed to have been caused by the use of marijuana. This left the family even more heartbroken. I can't imagine what they went through after losing 2 sons in very tragic circumstances. In October 2024, Lord Nicholas Monson revealed that he has a form of aggressive cancer eating him up, and the doctors have given him between 4 months and 4 years to live. The Monsons are in our thoughts and prayers. With that, I'd like to hear what your thoughts are on today's story down below. Also, please don't forget to subscribe, to like, and to share this episode with other true crime junkies like yourself. I'll see you right here on the next one.